Hey guys, I'm Michael Bigabayan Jr. from SBI 1G. I'm Group 12 at Chemistry for Engineers, and today I'm gonna talk. My topic is all about stoichiometry. Hi guys, so today I'm talking about stoichiometry. So what is stoichiometry? Stoichiometry comes from the Greek word stoichion, which means element, and the metron that means measure. It refers to the calculations used to determine the proportions of elements in chemical reactions. For example, when hydrogen react with oxygen to form water, stoichiometry let us calculate how much hydrogen and oxygen needed to produce with a specific amount of water. Now, let's talk about empirical formula. So, empirical formula of a compound is the simplest whole number ratio of the elements present in the compound. It does not provide information about the actual number of atoms in molecules, just the proportion of the elements. So, I'm gonna give you an example. So here's the example. We're given a compound that is 25% hydrogen and 75% carbon by mass. The goal is to find the empirical formula, which represents the simplest whole number ratio of atoms in the compound. To simplify the calculations, assume that we have 100 grams of compound. This makes the percentage directly into the mass. So hydrogen is 25% and carbon is 75%. The molar mass of carbon is 12.01 grams over moles, and the hydrogen is 1.008 grams over moles. Um, Next, we need to convert the given masses of each element into moles by dividing their molar masses. So the molar mass of this is 12.001 and the 1008. So we're gonna calculate the moles. In carbon, 75 divided by 12.01 is equal to 6.25 moles. And for hydrogen is 25 divided by 1.008 is equal to 24.8 moles. Then we have to determine the whole number ratio. To find the simplest ratio, divide the number of moles of each element by the smallest mole value. In this case, we have the smallest value, which is 6.25. So we're gonna divide it by itself. 6.25 divided by 6.25 is 1. And 24.8 divided by 6.25 is equal to 4. Then we have to write the empirical formula. The whole number of ratio is 1 is to 4, meaning there is 1 atom of carbon for every 4 atoms of hydrogen. Therefore, the empirical formula of the compound is CH4. Now, let's talk about molecular formula. The molecular formula of a compound shows the actual number of atoms of each element in a molecule. So, unlike the empirical formula, which gives the simplest ratio, the molecular formula provides the exact composition of the compound. So, I'm gonna give you again an example. So, a compound is found to contain a 40% of carbon and 6.7% in hydrogen. In hydrogen and 53.3% of oxygen by mass. The molar mass of the compound is 180 grams over mole. Find its molecular formula. So, same as well, Assume that we have 100 gram sample, the carbon have 40 grams, hydrogen has 6.7 grams, and oxygen has 53.3 grams. Then convert the let's convert the mass into moles. The moles is 12.01, 1.008, and 16. Yeah. So for carbon, we have 40 divided by 12.01 is equal to 3.33. And for hydrogen as we have 6.7 divided by 1.008 equal to, wait, it's kind of blurry, 6.65. And for oxygen, we have 53.3 divided by 16 is 3.33. Then we just factor it and we got 180 divided by 30.03 equal to 6. Then after that, we just multiply this into 6. So carbon, we have no value in here, so we just put 6. And for hydrogen, we have 2. So 6 times 2 is equal to 12. And for oxygen, we have no again, just put 6. Now this is the answer. So, in the limiting reactant is a substance that determines the amount of product formed in chemical reaction because it gets completely consumed first. Once the limiting reactant is used up, the reaction stops and no more products can be formed. So, I'm gonna give you guys an example of a limiting reactant. So, here's the example of a reactant. If react 2 moles of hydrogen with a 1 mole of oxygen to produce H2O, the chemical equation ay the balance equation is 2H2 plus O2 to 2H2O. From the equation, we have 2 moles of hydrogen with the react with 1 mole of oxygen. of oxygen. If you have 2 moles of H2 and 1 mole of O2, neither is limiting. They are in the exact stoichiometric ratio. So, if you have 3 moles of H2 and 1 mole of O2, O2 is limiting reactant because only 2 moles of H2 can react with 1 mole of O2, leaving 1 mole of H2 unreactant or unreacted. Yeah, so parang pag-anin niya lang siya. Didikitin. So, for molar mass is a concept in chemistry that represents the mass of 1 mole of a substance. It is expressed in grams per mole, like, wait, it's G over MOL. The molar mass of a substance can be calculated by adding the atomic masses of the element in its formula based in the periodic table. So, I'm gonna give you guys an example. So, in here, the molecular formula of water is H2O, which means it contains 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. So, the from this one is come from periodic table. Hydrogen equal to 1.008 gram per mole, and for oxygen is 16 grams per mole. Then just the molar mass of water is H2O equal to 2 times 1.008 plus 1 times 16. Then the answer is 2.016 plus 16. Then this is the final answer. This is the molar mass. So in stoichiometry, the term solution doesn't refer of a solute or a solvent. as it does chemistry. Generally, it refers to a process of calculating the amounts of reactants and products involved in a chemical equation or chemical reaction. When we talk about solution in stoichiometry, we are typically referring to the steps taken to determine the quantities of substances involved in a chemical reaction based on the molar ratios and other known values like molar masses, volumes, and etc. So, in solution, I'm gonna give you an example again. So, we have here, how many milliliters of 0.100 m NaOH are required to neutralize 25 ml of 0.200 m HCl. So, we have here the balance equation HCl plus NaOH to NaCl plus H2O. So, the mole relation, this shows a 1:1 mole ratio between HCl and NaOH. So, from the equation, 1 mole of HCl reacts with 1 mole of NaOH. So, we have to calculate the moles of HCl. So, we have to use this, wait lang. Yeah, this equation. Moles of HCl equal to M times B. So, we have 0.200 m times 0.0250 liters. So, the answer is 0.00500 moles. The after you get the moles, we have to get the moles of NaOH. Since the mole ratio of since the mole ratio is 1:1, 0.00500 moles of NaOH is required to neutralize 0.00500 moles of HCl. So, the volume of NaOH solution, we have to use the molarity equation rearranged to solve for volume. So, we have here V equal to moles divided by molarity. So, this is the solution. 0.00500 divided by 0.100 m equal to 0.0500 liters. Then, we just convert it into milliliters. So, this is the answer. $50 ml.
Good day everyone, my name is Charles B. Segula from SBIE 1G. In this video, we're gonna talk about gas law. So what is gas law? Gas laws are a group of laws that govern the behavior of gases by providing relationships between the following: the volume occupied by the gas, the pressure exerted by a gas on the walls of its container, the absolute temperature of the gas, the amount of gaseous substance, or the number of moles of gas. There are 4 general laws that relate the 4 basic characteristic properties of gases to each other. Each law is titled by its discoverer. In this lecture, we cover the gas laws, Charles' law, Boyd's law, and Gay-Lussac's law, as well as the ideal and combined gas laws. Now, let's go back to this formula. PV is equal to nRT, the ideal gas law equation. We know that the moles is equal to the mass divided by the molar mass or the molecular weight of the gas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace N with M over MW. And then multiplying both sides by the molar mass, we get this equation. So the pressure times the volume times the molar mass or the molecular weight of the gas is equal to the mass of the gas times R times T. So this formula is very useful if you need to calculate the molar mass of a gas. I mean, if you could use a combination of these two formulas. But if you want to write this down in your list, it'd be helpful if you need to calculate the mass or the molar mass of a gas. Now, starting from that formula, I'm going to divide both sides by V. So, I get pressure times the molar mass is equal to M over V times RT. M over V, mass divided by volume, is density. So, we get this. And then, dividing both sides by RT, we get the formula that will help us to calculate the density of a gas, which is this. The density of a gas is equal to the pressure times the molar mass of the gas divided by RT. So, if you know the molar mass of the gas, you can calculate the density of that gas. If you need to determine the identity of the gas, you could use the density, calculate the molar mass, and with the molar mass, that can help you identify what kind of gas you have. So make sure you add these two formulas to your list. So that's the first equation that we can get from this equation. Now, the next equation is going to be Boyle's law. If we hold the moles and the temperature constant, we're left with what we have on top, which is P1 B1 is equal to P2 B2. So that's Boyle's law. His law describes the relationship between volume and pressure, which is an inverse relationship. As you increase the volume, the pressure decreases. Now let's move on to Charles' law. In Charles' law, we're going to hold the pressure and the moles constants. So we're left with B1 over T1 is equal to B2 over T2. So, his law describes the relationship between the volume of a gas and the temperature. As you increase the temperature, the volume of the gas is going to increase. It's going to expand, and so that's the relationship is associated with Charles' law. Next up, we have Gay-Lussac's law, which shows the relationship between pressure and temperature. So, holding volume and moles constant, we get P1 over T1 is equal to P2 over T2. So that's Gay-Lussac's law. If we were to plot a graph for this, place in the temperature on the x-axis, pressure on the y-axis. These two shows a direct relationship between the two, much in the same way as Charles' law. As the temperature goes up, pressure goes up. So imagine having the gas in a rigid container. If you heat up the gas, the pressure on the inside is going to build. Now, let's move on to Boyle's law. Boyle's law states that volume of a given amount of gas held at a constant temperature varies inversely with pressure. The relationship between pressure and volume of Boyle's law is expressed in mathematical terms as P1 B1 is equal to P2 B2. So, meron tayong meron tayong dalawang pambomba ng lobo. Ayan, and then Nakikita natin sa unang pambobo ng lobo, yung pressure niya is low. And then, sa pangalawang pambobo ng lobo is high. And then, yung volume ng unang pambobo ng lobo is high. And then, sa pangalawang pambobo ng lobo is low. Dahil, kaya naging low yung pressure niya kasi hindi siya ganun hindi ganun mataas yung pressure niya. And then, yung volume niya is high kasi mas malaki yung space na ginagalawan nila. And inversely, dun sa kabila, mas high yung pressure niya kasi mas maliit na lang space na ginagalawan na space ng particle. And for example number 1, at 1.70 atm, a sample of gas takes up 4.25 liters if the pressure in the gas is increased to 2.40 atm. What will the new volume will be? For that solution is we have B1 is equal to P2 B2, and P1 indicates na ito yung before, and then the P2 is after. So ito yung gagamitin natin formula para ma-solve yung problem na yan. So meron tayong P1 na before, meron tayong B1 which is yung 4.25, and then P2 the 2.40 atm, and then yung B2 ang hinahanap. What will the new volume be? So B1 divided by over P2 is equal to B2. Magiging ganito yung yung formula natin since dito yung hinahanap, yung new volume. So substitute the given. So P1 is 1.70 atm times 4.25 liters divided by 2.40 atm. So since pares silang atm, pwede natin silang i-cancel kasi ang hinahanap din ay volume. So liters ang magiging ang natin sa final answer. So ang pinakasagot is 1.70 times 4.25 divided by 2.40 is equal to 3.01. Let's move on to Charles' law. Charles' law states that the volume of a given mass of a gas is directly proportional to its Kelvin temperature at constant pressure. In mathematical terms, the relationship between temperature and volume is expressed as B1 over T1 is equal to B2 over T2. For volume and temperature, which is Charles' law, for example, meron tayong lobo, and then patan natin siya ng araw, so the temperature will be high, and then on the other hand, we have yung lobo, pwede ilagay natin sa freezer, lagyan natin ng tube ice dito, so the temperature is low, and then the volume will be high because in first balloon the area is more than wide, and then dito sa kabilang balloon is mas maliit yung space na ginagalawan niya. So temperature will be high and volume will be high, and then on the other hand, temperature will be low and then volume will be low. So the relationship of volume and temperature will be direct relationship. So let's go to example. A balloon takes up 625 liters at 0 degree Celsius. If it is heated to 80 degrees Celsius, what will its new volume be? So, ang formula sa volume and temperature is B1 over T1 is equal to B1 over T2. Temperature must use Kelvin temperature. So, para makuha ang Kelvin temperature, ang formula natin is degree Celsius plus 273 is equal to Kelvin. So, and then, ang kailangan nating hanapin is ang B2, which is yung volume. So, pwede nating ilipat si temperature 2 sa kabila para makuha natin si B2. So, B1 times T2 over T1 is equal to B2. So, bago natin malagay dyan yung mga given, kailangan muna natin yung temperature gawing Kelvin. So, T1, substitute the number in the given. So, 0 degree plus 273 is equal to 273 Kelvin. So, sa T2, 80 degree plus 273 is equal to 353 Kelvin. 253 Kelvin. Ganyan. And then, yung gagamitin natin solution, yung gagamitin natin formula is B1 times T2 is over T1 is equal to B2. So, substitute lang natin yung mga given na binigay. So, 625 liters times 353 Kelvin divided by 273 Kelvin. So, since ang liters ang hinahanap natin, cancel the Kelvin, then liters, and the answer will be 808 liters. Gay-Lussac's law states that the pressure of a given mass of gas varies directly with the Kelvin temperature when the volume remains constant. Gay-Lussac's law is expressed in a formula form as P1 over T1 is equal to P2 over T2. When dealing with Gay-Lussac's law, the unit of the temperature should always be in Kelvin. So, if the pressure in car tire is 1.88 atm at 25 degrees Celsius, what will be the pressure if the temperature warms to 337 Celsius? Formula is P1 over T1 is equal to P2 over T2. So, sabi nga kanina, temperature must be Kelvin temperature. So, una muna natin gawin, kunin natin yung formula para makuha yung T2. So, yung T2, pwede natin siyang ilipat dito. So, ang magiging formula is P1 times T2 all over T1 is equal to P2. So, para makompleto natin yung given, i-substitute muna natin gawin muna natin Kelvin si Celsius. So, para nga makuha yung Kelvin temperature, ang formula natin is degree Celsius plus 237 is equal to Kelvin. So, unang-una is 25 Celsius yung T1. 25 Celsius plus 273 is equal to 298 Kelvin. And then, 37 Celsius plus 273 is equal to 310 Kelvin for T2. And then, substitute all the given. So, ang gagamitin natin formula is P1 times T2 over T1 is equal to P2. So, P1 is 1.88 atm times T2, 310 Kelvin divided by T1, 298 Kelvin. So, since pressure ang hinahanap, ang atmosphere may iwan. So, Kelvin, pwede natin i-cancel, and then 1.88 times 310 divided by 98 is equal to 1.96 atm. Now, let's move on to combined gas law. The combined gas law combines Charles law, Boyle's law, and Gay-Lussac's law. The combined gas law states that a gas pressure times volume divided by temperature is equal to constant. A gas at 110 kilopascal at 30 degrees Celsius fills a flexible container with an initial volume of 2 liters. If the temperature is raised to 80 degrees Celsius and the pressure increases to 440 kilopascal, what is the new volume? So, una natin gagawin is sulat natin ang formula ng combined gas law. So, B1 times B1 is over T1 is equal to B2 over T2. So, ang given natin is si P1 ay 110 kilopascal. Si B1 is 2.00 liters. Si T1 is 303 Kelvin. And then si P2 440 kilopascal. And then si T2 is equal to 353 Kelvin. Para makuha si T1 303 30 degrees Celsius plus 273 is equal to 303 Kelvin. And then si T2 para makuha siya 80 degrees Celsius plus 273 is equal to 253 Kelvin. And then si B2 question mark siya kasi siya yung hinahanap. And then substitute na natin siya sa may formula. So 110 which is yung P1, 110 kilopascal times 2 liters si B1 over 303 Kelvin T1 is equal to 404 kilopascal times B2 since wala si B2 all over 353 Kelvin. So kailangan natin siya, ang gagawin natin dito is cross multiply and then para makuha yung sa answer. So cross multiply ito yung ito. And then, ang makakuha yung sagot is 77660. And then, cross-multiply din dito sa kabila. Ang makakuha yung sagot is 133320. B2. Since si B2, hinahanap na siya. So, yung variable lang na niya ilalagay natin. And then, we divide into number that have variable. So, may variable is si 133,320. So, divide natin siya both sides. And then, pwede natin i-cancel si 13320 dito sa may B2 since pareha siya. So, ang magiging sagot, ang matitirang sagot pag pinag-multiply si 7760 and 13320 is 0.58 liters. Kaya siya naging liters since B2 volume ang hinahanap, kaya siya ay naging liters. Now, let's move on to ideal gas law. The ideal gas law mathematically relates the pressure, volume, amount, and temperature of a gas with the equation pressure times volume is equal to moles times ideal gas constant times temperature, which is PV is equal to nRT. Well, for the example of ideal gas law is what is the pressure in ATM of a 1.08 moles sample of the gas at a temperature of 20 Celsius if its volume is 0.505 liters. So, ang natin gagawin is ang formula ng ideal gas law is PV is equal to nRT. So, ang P is variable. So, P. Ang value ng B is equal to 0.505 liters. And then, ang value ng N, which is yung moles, is 1.08. And then, ang R, which is walang ang ATM, ang value nito is 0.0821. And then, ang value ng T is 20 Celsius. So, 20 Celsius plus 273 para maging Kelvin. So, ang temperature is 293 Kelvin. And then, kapag pinag-times mo siya pag sinimplify mo siya, and pinag-times mo siya, ang magiging sagot is 5.14 APM. So let's move on to Dalton's law of partial. So Dalton's law of partial pressures is a gas law which states that the total pressure exerted by a mixture of gases is equal to the sum of the partial pressures exerted by each individual gas in the mixture. So, for the example of Dalton's partial law is there's a problem. A mixture of hydrogen gas and oxygen has exerts a total pressure of 1.5 atm on the walls of its container. If the partial pressure of hydrogen is 1 atm, find the mole fraction of oxygen in the mixture. So para makuha siya is, ang given is P hydrogen is equal to 1 atm. Ang P total is equal to 1.5 atm. And then, P total, ang formula is P total is equal to P hydrogen plus P oxygen. Then, ang value ng P oxygen is 0.5 atm. Then, para makuha ang mole fraction ng mixture, ang gagamitin is P oxygen is over P total is equal to 0.5 divided by 1.5. Yung 0.5 is yung oxygen and 1.5 yung P total. So, pag dinivide sila is equal to 0.33. So, the mole fraction of mixture is 0.33. And that's all for this video. Thank you.
Chances are that you haven't thought a lot about the soil under your feet, but you may be surprised at the complexity of soil. Soil varies in its composition and the structure of its particles, and these factors are closely examined by farmers who need appropriate soil for planting crops, as well as engineers who may need to understand how soil is going to hold up under different demands. Soil is also vitally important to the sustainability of an ecosystem because it serves as the natural medium for the growth of vegetation. In fact, 3% of the Earth's surface is considered as arable soil. As human beings, we must be aware of our surroundings and must care of our resources, since soil is one of the most important natural resources that we have, and it provides the medium for plant growth, and that's why we should appreciate and care for it. So, what exactly is soil? Soil is commonly referred to as earth, is a mixture of organic matter, minerals, gases, liquids, or organisms that together support the life of plant and soil organisms. Some scientific definition distinguish earth. Soil can be considered as a living skin of the earth, and it provides the three main nutrients for plants to live and grow. These are the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Soilchemistry is a branch of soil science that deals with the chemical composition, chemical properties, and chemical reaction of soils. It involves the chemical reactions and processes between these components and particularly focuses on investigating the fate of contaminants and nutrients within soils. In other words, soil chemistry is the study of chemical characteristics of soil. Soil chemistry is affected by minerals composition, organic matter, and environmental factors. With the knowledge of soil chemistry, allows scientists to monitor, control, and predict the effect of pollutants in the environment, like chemical knowledge, combined with understandings from the earth science, physics, and biology are the needed to understand, prevent, and remediate environmental issues with soils. When we say pollution, it is the process of making land, water, air, or other parts of the environment dirty and not safe or suitable to use. This can be done through the introduction of contaminant into a natural environment, but the contaminant doesn't need to be tangible. The environment can get contaminated in a number of different ways. Things as simple as light, sound, and temperature can be considered pollutants when introduced into an environment, and according to some studies, it is the largest environmental cause of disease and premature death. Any harmful material that, by getting introduced into the environment, causes environmental pollution is called a pollutant. In other words, a pollutant is any substance that contaminates air, water, soil, etc., and damages their quality. Pollutants can be natural, such as volcanic ash, or created by human activity, such as trash or factory runoff. Environmental pollution is the introduction of foreign and potentially harmful materials into environment. In other words, environmental pollution is the contamination of the physical and biological components of the environment to such an extent that normal environmental processes are adversely affected. The consequences are particularly important when they damage ecosystems and human societies, especially with regard to health. Pollution is not a human prerogative. Volcanoes, for example, also emit pollutants. It is, however, certain that our species is contributing massively to environmental pollution, and this has increased over the past centuries. This issue has led to threats to human health, ecosystem, and overall well-being of our planet. Environmental pollution can be categorized into several types based on the nature of the pollutants and the media they affect. Like tropospheric pollution, it refers to the contamination of the troposphere, which is the lowest part of Earth's atmosphere, where all weather phenomena occur and where most of Earth's atmospheric mass is found. This type of pollution is caused by the release of harmful substances into the air, including pollutants like nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, volatile organic compounds, particulate matter, and greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and methane. These pollutants can originate from a variety of sources, including vehicles, industries, power plant, and agricultural activities. This pollution can have wide range effect on the environment and human health, leading to problems like acid rain, global warming, respiratory problems, and heart disease. Atmospheric pollution is any undesirable change in physical, chemical, and biological properties of the atmosphere or contamination due to human activities which make it harmful for living beings. Atmospheric pollution is a great threat towards the existence of humankind as we need oxygen for our survival. Pollutants from human activities are significant contributors to atmospheric pollution, and it caused by motor vehicles, garbage, electric generation, and excessive consumer productions or products. The burnings, the burnings of fossil fuels such as coal, gas, oil, etc. is one of the major causes of atmospheric pollution. This releases carbon oxides at a severely high level, which is harmful to the atmosphere. It also emits other types of toxic pollutants into the air. This is needed to create awareness among people about atmospheric pollution so that it can be prevented. Stratospheric pollution implies the exhaustion of the ozone layer by specific mixtures like oxides of nitrogen, chlorofluorocarbons. The stratosphere is the layer of Earth's atmosphere just above the troposphere and below the mesosphere. The upper stratosphere consists a considerable amount of ozone, which protect us from the harmful ultraviolet radiations coming from the sun. This radiation causing skin cancer in humans. It happens because of direct infusion as from supersonic vehicles, military airplanes, rockets, or atomic bombs, and by sequesteous infusion from the lower atmosphere, which might happen for inactive, water-insoluble substances that will ultimately move gradually up into the atmosphere or stratosphere. Water pollution refers to the contamination of water bodies such as rivers, lakes, and oceans with pollutants such as industrial influence, sewage, agricultural runoff, and oil spills. It happens when chemical or dangerous foreign substances are introduced to water, leading to water quality degradation, like toxic chemicals, sewage, pesticides, and fertilizers from agricultural runoff, or metals like lead or mercury contribute to this kind of pollution. Contaminated water affects aquatic life, disrupts ecosystems, and poses serious health risks to humans. According to National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, 80% of pollution in a marine environment comes from the land through sources like runoff. Water pollution can also severely affect marine life. For example, sewage causes pathogens to grow, while organic and inorganic compounds in water can change the composition of the precious resources. Lastly, soil pollution. It refers to soil contamination with harmful substances including heavy metals, pesticides, and industrial waste. It occurs when the pollutants causing the pollution reduce the quality of the soil and convert the soil inhabitable for microorganisms and macroorganisms living in the soil. Major sources of soil pollution include the deposition of hazardous chemicals, heavy metals, and waste on land. Key factors are agriculture practices involving excessive use of pesticides and fertilizers, industrial waste dumping, and improper disposal of solid waste, which also causes environmental pollution. It will reduce soil fertility, contaminate crops, and affect food security. This can occur either because of human activities or because of natural processes. However, mostly it is due to human activities.
Good day everyone, my name is Porjasin Maneklang, and today I will discuss the key concept related to the soil solution and its importance for plant growth. So let's begin by understanding what soil solution is. So, soil solution refers to the liquid phase of soil that contains dissolved ions, organic compounds, and nutrients. This solution acts as a bridge between the soil and the plant roots, supplying nutrients essential for growth. So the soil solution is dynamic. It changes constantly as plants take up nutrients, water infiltrates, or chemical reactions occur within the soil. Its composition can provide critical insights into the health of the soil and its ability to support plant life.
Let's proceed to the cation exchange capacity. Cation exchange capacity, or CEC,
A fundamental soil property used to predict plant nutrient availability and retention in the soil. It is the potential of available nutrient supply, not a direct measurement of available nutrients, and it is defined as the sum of total exchangeable that a soil can absorb. So, it is one of the most important indicators of soil fertility. It measures how well the soil can hold and exchange positively charged ions or such as calcium, magnesium, and potassium. Exchange capacity is defined as a soil's total quantity of negative surface charges. It is measured commonly in commercial soil testing labs by summing positively charged ions that are attracted to the negative surface charges in soil. Exchangeable calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium, as well as acid cations such as hydrogen, aluminum, and ammonium. So now, as you can see on the table, soil CEC typically increases as clay content and organic matter increase. Occurs on surfaces of clay minerals, organic matter, and roots. Soils in Ohio can encompass a wide CEC range but typically fall somewhere between 5 to 25 milliequivalents per 100 grams soil. Values over 25 milliequivalents per 100 grams soil are found with heavy clay soils, organic, or muck soils.
let's calculate base cation. We begin by summing the concentration of the base cation.
Calcium with 8 milliequivalents per 100 grams, magnesium with 3 milliequivalents per 100 grams, potassium with 1 milliequivalents per 100 grams, sodium with 1 milliequivalents per 100 grams. Adding this together, the total base equal to 13 milliequivalents per 100 grams. So, second step, we need to calculate the acid. So, hydrogen with 2 milliequivalents per 100 grams, aluminum with 0.5 milliequivalents per 100 grams, ammonium with 0.5 milliequivalents per 100 grams. Summing these values given us 3 milliequivalents per 100 grams. So, last step we need to do is total the exchange capacity. The total CEC is the sum of the
cations and acid cations.
CEC is equal to 13 base plus 3 acid equal to 16 milliequivalents per 100 grams. For the given soil sample, the CEC is 16 milliequivalents per 100 grams, which aligns with the typical range for loams 10 to 15 milliequivalents per 100 grams, or silt loams with 15 to 25 milliequivalents per 100 grams based on the provided table. So let's proceed to the base saturation. Calcium base saturation is calculated as the percentage of CEC occupied by calcium. So in the image below, the soil on the right has twice as many calcium, thus a higher calcium saturation. It illustrates a low CEC soil with a small number of negative charges and associated on the left, and a high base saturation soil with a larger amount of negative charges occupied by a greater number of total on the right. So now let's proceed on the anion exchange. So anion exchange is a chemical process that involves exchanging or removing anions, or the process of separating substances based on their charge, such as anion exchange chromatography, anion exchange in water treatment, anion exchange in purifying cytosolic material, and anion exchange resin. So what does anion exchange do? Anion exchange chromatography is used both for preparative and analytical purposes and can separate a large range of molecules from amino acids and nucleotides to large proteins. Acidity and basicity. Soil acidity refers to the presence of a high concentration of hydrogen ions in the soil solution, resulting in a potential of hydrogen level below 7. Acidic soils often arise from natural processes like organic matter decomposition, leaching of base such as calcium and magnesium, or the use of ammonium-based fertilizers. High acidity can limit nutrient availability and increase toxic elements like aluminum and manganese. So, soil basicity or alkalinity is the condition where the soil has a low concentration of hydrogen ions and a high presence of bases such as calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium, leading to a potential of hydrogen's level above 7. Basic soils are often found in a arid region where limited rainfall prevents the leaching of base. Excessive alkalinity can reduce the availability of macronutrients like iron, manganese, and zinc. So let's proceed on the plant requirements. So for healthy growth, plants require a balanced supply of nutrients as well as favorable physical and chemical soil conditions. Macronutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are needed in large quantities. These nutrients play essential roles in processes like photosynthesis, root development, and flower formation. Secondary nutrients such as calcium, magnesium, and sulfur are equally important, contributing to structural integrity and enzymatic functions. In addition to nutrients, plants need a stable soil environment with proper aeration and moisture retention. This is particularly important for root respiration and nutrient uptake. The soil's chemical balance, including proper and anion availability, ensures plants receive the nutrients they need. So finally, maintaining an optimal potential hydrogen ensures nutrients remain accessible to plants without balanced soil conditions. Even nutrient-rich soil may fail to support healthy plant growth. In conclusion, the soil solution is the lifeline of plant nutrition. Properties like exchange capacity, base saturation, anion exchange, and potential of hydrogen significantly impact the availability of nutrients to plants. So, by understanding and managing these properties, we can improve soil health and optimize crop productivity, whether through soil testing, nutrient management, or potential of hydrogen adjustments. Sustainable practices can ensure that our soils remain fertile and productive for generations to come. So, thank you for watching.